Hello, I'm Steph from iDriver Classic, and on this rather windy day, we're having a look at a car that you may never have seen before if you live outside of Japan or New Zealand. It is the Honda logo. Now, these were only sold in the UK for just under 9 months, which means there were never very many to start with, and now due to things like scrappage scheme and corrosion, there are less than 300 remaining on the roads of Great Britain today. Now, all the reviews online that I'd seen really slated this car. They said it was boring, it was lackluster, that it wasn't much fun at all. But here's the thing, sometimes reviewers don't get things quite right, and you need to get out there and have a first-hand experience. So in today's video, we're coming at it with a fresh set of eyes and looking at a car which is slightly unusual and a bit of a flash in the pan for Honda. So we're going to find out, is it as bad as people say, or are people just being a little bit downhearted on a car which was aimed at quite a budget market? Strap yourselves in, we're about to find out. The logo first appeared in Japan in 1996, but was never intended to come to the UK. It was a sedate around-town vehicle, which was popular enough, and if you're wondering where it was sitting in the range, it was below the Civic as Honda's supermini. Honda had, instead of selling the logo, decided the car for Great Britain was the Jazz, but it came up against a problem because the Jazz and Swindon production line just weren't ready, and there was a potential to lose market share to cars like the Punto, the Corsa, the 206. And Honda recognised that once people get locked into a brand, they don't tend to switch, and they were worried about losing potential market share. So they decided the answer was simple. What they would do was they would ship over a boatload of the Honda logos to plug that market gap until the Jazz and Swindon were ready to roll. But here's the thing, demand wasn't excessive, which meant that one boatload did the job for the entire 9-month stopgap of April 2000 to January 2001. But what of this little flash in the pan, and what did Honda put into a car which was dubbed by the Guardian newspaper as painfully bland? Now, it is worth mentioning actually, and it's quite interesting, and I read this in a Haggerty article, that many of the reviewers of the time never actually drove one of these because Honda weren't handing them out because they only had one boatload. So a lot of people just made aspersions and generalisations based on what they could see in either press photos or the muted 2000 launch, which means that today's video is probably more powerful than many of those written reviews at the time, because I'm actually going to drive it and tell you what it's like. Now, for such a smaller car, Honda had very big ambitions and saw congestion and lack of space in built-up areas not as a problem, but as an opportunity. And they saw the logo as the answer to the age-old problem of needing personal transport in an area where space is at a premium. Now, first of all, the car design was considered. The body is short with a long, tall cabin. Honda decided to achieve space, you had to mimic a skyscraper, and that meant going up and not going out. And with that, they put in things like elevated seating positions. Maybe today's manufacturers could think about that, because cars nowadays are enormous and very hard to navigate into small spaces in town. Now, whilst we talk about seating, Honda said they wanted to reduce the driver's stress, which was why instead of going for pottery little seats that are going to hurt your back, they went for the same size seats as one of their bigger cars, which could be adjusted with front and rear height adjusters. Comfort and consideration didn't stop there, and the car is designed with wider opening doors to make getting in the back as accessible as possible. Plus, the boot lid has a lower than average sill, which makes loading up smooth as possible. The interior wasn't the only concern, by the way, and the body shell is stiffened with extra strengtheners and moulded bumpers which are styled around high tensile steel beams. Now, this may not mean anything when you're going from A to B, but if you're in an accident, that's going to count for something. And whilst it's probably not top of thieves' list, sorry Honda logo owners, should they be so inclined, they may be foiled by Honda's rolling code immobiliser and protectors around the door locks. There are also other bits which make this a really attractive retro vehicle to the modern driver. Things like vented front discs, ABS, power steering and even aircon, which I do rave about quite a lot later on in the video. The engine is an all-alloy 1343cc single overhead camshaft 4-cylinder affair. The lightweight design and lower internal friction was said to mean that it could and would perform better using less fuel on those stop-start city drives. Now, this is all very impressive, but where are they all today? Well, in the UK, they are an incredibly endangered species. They've been killed off by things like corrosion, scrappage schemes, and now look, I'm not going to say that we don't all like clean air, but those clean air zones are just killing off so many vehicles like this. They just don't like them. So again, another car which hits the scrappage scheme. Now thankfully, appreciation is growing as these fit so neatly into the JDM scene. But if you're watching this video and thinking, I really fancy one, you need to get a move on because the good examples are fading fast. Now I'm smiling because I got into this with very low expectations. It was a budget car at the time. It came in at £9,495 for this particular model. Although if you went for the SE, which gives you a bit more bells and whistles, that I think is £1,000 extra. But for the Bobby Basic budget car, I wasn't expecting too much. And I've actually got in and thought, you know what? This is a really great, small, around town car. And I'm going to tell you why. So number one is I think the use of space inside here is incredibly clever. Now I was talking about the vehicle construction when we were walking around, but when you get inside, you start to see how they've used the space. And you see this on so many Japanese cars where they look at the car, they utilize the space really well, and they make you feel like you're in a much larger vehicle than you perhaps are. So let me show you. The legroom in the back here, there is more than enough for a tall adult to have their legs in and to have the space, and you're not having to roll this passenger front seat forward so far that you end up cutting their legs off either. There's enough room for both. And in terms of using that space in the back wisely, you've also got a split back seat. So if you do have a particularly big load, you can just pile it all in and just roll that seat forward and there's no problems whatsoever. And also, if you've got a piece of large furniture from somewhere like IKEA, you can take these headrests off. So I've been able to do that today for filming. Now coming in front of here, it all seems rather basic, but I'm going to show you a couple of things that I think make very good use of the space. So first of all, you've got your glove box down here, and something I maybe necessarily wasn't expecting to see straight away is not only have you got a driver's airbag, you've also got a passenger airbag as well. Now if you look in some of the MG Rover stuff from the time, so looking at a homegrown brand, sometimes when you see those airbags inserted in, they can look slightly unsightly. In here, it's just kind of gently moulded into that dash and it doesn't appear too much of a whacked in extra. And they're coming into the middle as our summers get hotter, because we feel like we've had a few summers where we've been hitting those high 30s and we even hit 40. Was it last year or the year before? And it was so hot inside the car and I thought, God, I wish I had aircon. And that wasn't something I was expecting to see on this, because look, most of this panel here in the middle seems to be made up of heater controls. So I'm going to show you anyway. So you've got your vents up here, which is next to your hazard warning switch, and you can start coming down into these heater controls. So you've got the directional, you've got the temperature, you've got 4 different speeds here, and you've got all the other bits and pieces. So you've got rear heated screen, and you've also got air conditioning. Mwah, beautiful. Do you know what, even on a slightly warm day, aircon is just a great thing to have, and it wasn't something I was expecting to see, although it is a Japanese car that was sold predominantly in Japan and New Zealand, so I guess it was probably very much welcome over there, and in all your Japanese stuff you get aircon. But anyway, coming down from there, we've got the original cassette tape radio, which is a nice feature to have. Again, it's these lovely original features which allow us to experience the car as a brand new user would have. You've got your fog lights. Coming down, you've got your cigar lighter, and again, that seems to be the original, and you've got your ashtray, beautifully clean. It doesn't look or certainly smell like it's ever been smoked in. Again, just a really nice thing. And coming over here, you've got your mirror controls. Now these are all electric. And again, that wasn't something I was expecting to see on a budget motor. And you know what else I wasn't expecting to see? You see this tiny button here, which the owner Adam described as looking sort of like a high-heeled shoe. That is heated mirror controls. So if you get in the depths of winter and your mirrors are all frozen up, you're not standing outside with an old card trying to scrape it all off, or a window scraper. That little button's doing it all for you, which is quite a nice detail to have. It's very small, but I didn't want to overlook it. Now coming in front, your controls are exactly as you'd expect. So on the left hand side, you've got your lights and your indicators, and on your right hand side, you've got all your wiper controls. Again, 2-speed, exactly what we'd expect, but you've also got a rear wiper as well. Again, it's just these nice little details that I'd come in with such low expectations for a budget car I wasn't expecting to see. In front of us, it's all analog, and I love that, because I think that when you get with your digital dials, sometimes things tend to get, I don't know, it loses a little bit of charm for me. This still feels quite retro with those dials. And over to the left hand side, you've got your temperature gauge, your fuel gauge and your rev counter, and on the right hand side you've got your speedo, and around that you've got all your little warning lights. So everything is very succinctly laid out, and it's nice and easy. Now, one of the things that this car does really well, because space is at a premium, is they build in space where they can. So not only have you got these door pockets that you can slide things into, you've got this little cubby hole up here, you've got drinks holders down here. Now if you look at an original brochure, it says you've got your drinks holders so you can keep hydrated as you're driving around town. Hey, it doesn't matter. Coming down from here, you've got another cubby hole, and you've got another one just back here as well. And so you've got everything you need in this very small compact car, because this car was designed, as I was telling you earlier, for a world that was becoming more congested. It meant that people could still get around and still have a vehicle to do all their personal travel in. So for somewhere like London or something like that, this would be a perfect vehicle. Although I don't know if it would meet emissions. It's not something that I checked. I didn't check to see if it would meet ULEZ, but well, it just seems to be getting stricter and stricter, so probably not. But it's a great little city car. Now I'm going to start it up. I was talking about that engine earlier. It's the 1343cc alloy engine, which is paired with a 5-speed manual. Now you could pay extra to have the automatic, but it's just standard in here. So I'm going to let you have a listen. It's so quiet. So that's it on tick over. It is so quiet in here. I wonder how noisy the fan is. That was quite ferocious actually. I'll give it a rev so you can have a listen. Really nice, isn't it? I do think that we are spoilt with a very nice example, and it's been well cared for quite evidently. So this, for your records at home, so you can know how far it is into its life cycle, it's a 2000 model and it's on just over 50,000 from new. So I'm going to bang the seatbelt on and we'll go and take it out for a drive. Right, let's go on an adventure. Have you ever got into a car and just been able to drive it straight away, like you've been driving it all your life? Because that is what's happened here. It is the most easy, comfortable thing that I have driven in months. It's more comfortable to drive than my Proton, for goodness sakes. It's a really nice, modern, fun little car, which actually still fits into that retro box. And for technicality speak, it would also fit into classic car insurance as well, because it's over 20 years old. Now, as we drive down this country road, my visibility is just, I can see every bit of the car and I am so confident driving it. But it is worth saying that Honda had all of this in mind, because the driving seat in this is 50mm higher than any other, I think, because they all had a standard driving position, like seating position in their cars. But Honda put this one up by 50mm to give you the ultimate visibility in your little city car, because they thought about the city user who was going to be doing little trips into town, trying to fit in the car into small spaces. Because if you look at an original brochure for one of these, it says the Honda logo turning a gap into a space, which is kind of cool. Now you might be thinking, because it's an around town vehicle, that it's going to be rather stodgy, but here's the thing, it's not. In fact, it's really impressed me for what it does. I always said I wanted a Corsa B, but I've actually now asked, along with Fred, for first refusal on this, because it is just so jolly in everything that it offers. It gives you a top speed of around 95 miles per hour. I always say around because, I mean, how close can you get to manufacturer's spec? And when I read a review of this online, it said, oh, you wouldn't want to take it that high. Look, getting inside here, I'm quite surprised at how well built it feels. It's really rather sturdy in a way that I wasn't really expecting for a budget motor. I thought it might feel all rather tinny inside, but if someone said to me, go and get it up to 90 miles per hour, I would do it without worrying, because there's no wind noise inside the cabin. Even as we come over all these unsightly potholes, it takes it all in its stride. It has had its springs replaced, so I think it's slightly lower. I think it's lower by about 30 millimeters, not too much, but just worth mentioning for the purists out there. But even so, and it's slightly detracted from the original spec, it's handling everything just so well. Now you've got power steering on this, which means that not only is the steering responsive, it's also very light, but not too light in that way that sometimes you do get with some of these vehicles. It's just a rather pleasurable experience. Now there's another reason that I think that this would be a great addition to the iDriver Classic fleet. It does 45 miles per gallon. I mean, you can't really ask for much better than that in a small car. I think that's cracking. And by the way, for anybody who thinks that, oh, it's got that 1343cc engine, it's doing that incredible miles per gallon, they're thinking, that's going to be a bit sludgy. Not really. 0 to 60 in 14 seconds. And watch, you put your foot down, and she's an absolute goer. Look at her. You come round these bends. For everyone on test that said it was really boring, I don't think it is for a small car, because it's old enough that you still feel a connection to the road and the environment outside of you, but it's modern enough that you've got all the modern trimmings that you need, a few extras, and it keeps up with everything modern out there, and it has all your bits and pieces that you need. And I know that quite a few of my viewers are a little bit younger or looking for something retro that you can take to shows, still turn heads, but you've got enough of a modern driving experience that you don't feel too inconvenienced. Or perhaps they're getting a little bit older, they want something a bit retro but doesn't need massive upkeep. Something like this really ticks that box. Now I like to have a retro daily on the fleet because I don't like anything too modern, because it all just feels too overwhelming for me. And with such a limited display in front of you, with nice easy chunky controls here that have stood up really well to the passing of time, this does tick all those boxes. I think if you were to say, oh, it's boring, well, what are you comparing it to? When it was for sale, it was up against stuff like a Corsa. I think, what else is it up against? I think Punto. It wasn't up against stuff that was, you know, madly exciting. For a cheap city runaround that you can pile all your mates in, that you can get all your shopping, that's quite versatile for all the things that you might need it for, it really does tick all the boxes. What don't I like about it? Well, I wish it was in a more exciting colour. I guess that's probably my only takeaway from it, because everything else, it's absolutely spot on. All the controls have held up well across the passing of time. The dash has held up well. The headlining isn't sagging. The seats, the upholstery, all of that has stayed uniform. It's, you know, it doesn't show its age. It's a very attractive prospect, and also it's a great entry car for the JDM world, because something like this, you can go to all your JDM meets, but it doesn't have that horrendous price tag that you see across a lot of the sportier JDM stuff, which, you know, goes upwards now of 8, 10, 15, 20. Some of it's going even higher for those special models, whereas these, well, this one is valued at under £2,000, which, if you're a young person watching and you want a car that's going to let you into that classic car market, and that JDM world, but you don't have an enormous budget, a Honda logo is not a bad choice. And best of all, because of the size of it, because of the fact that it isn't particularly exceptional from the outside, it means that you can take it into a car park or a multi-story and you're not too worried that someone is going to steal it, because people with untrained eyes are just going to kind of walk past it. So it really is the versatile vehicle that do everything. Classic car shows, JDM, fun with your friends, something a little bit quirky to drive that isn't tying you into some sort of crippling PCP payment plan, especially if you're on a low wage. It's a really great choice. And I'm sitting here struggling for something bad to say about it. All the reviews were like, oh, it's boring, it's this, it's that. It's not. It's just cheap, budget, fun motoring in a world where I often talk about things are a lot more boring and regulated than perhaps you want them to be. Now, reluctantly, we are handing the keys back to Adam, but for how long? Because he is going to be moving over to Australia at some point, and we have asked for first refusal on this. And if I'm honest, it'll probably be joining the iDriver Classic fleet at some time, because Fred has said for his commute, which is quite long, it would be a great choice doing that 45 miles per gallon. So for today, we say goodbye, take care and drive safely, but I don't think this will be the last time you see this car. So, guess we're going to sign off as standard. Take care and drive safely.